der Berg und so. Eppes neuet, eppes bringt sich noch die Zeiten von Amon.
There are people who remember a man with blue spectacles who stood on the corner of Gitka Toyby's lane, begging, "Take me across to the other side." We never knew if he was really blind and needed someone to help him across the street, or if he just longed for the touch of a warm hand. He wanted someone to take him to the opposite side, to the corner of Yiddish Street, where a small pump supplied water to all the poor courtyards nearby. Now, if no one came to help him, after a little while, the man crossed the street on his own, tapping the cobblestones with his cane as he went.
Why did I think about that particular man when I stood on that same corner after so many years? Absolutely nothing remained. And yet, when I stopped there, the man's pleas rang in my ears. Gitketoibes Lane bordered on Daiche Street, the liveliest street in all of Vilna. It was called Daiche Street, even before the German murderers came to our city to slaughter the Jews. That street was my kingdom. I was friends with all the hucksters who eked out a living, dragging customers into the ready-made clothing stores. I wasn't in their line of work. I didn't pull in customers. What I got, I took from people's pockets. The entire street knew how I, Itzik the Hare, earned my bread. When the street was in an uproar from one end to the other, the hucksters would growl, "Itzik, scram, quick as a hare." Well, they didn't have to ask me twice. Quick as lightning, I ran to my regular hiding place behind the poultry dealers on Yatkiver Street. That's how I earned my nickname, the Hare. I was still a boy then, just out of prison for the first time. I had yet to learn my trade. I was still shoving both hands into my victim's pocket. Zuske, the professor, who had a bar on Konski Street, taught me what I needed to know. He had a school for pickpockets. He got some of the young guys who hung around the streets together and taught us the trade. During the lessons, he'd shout, "Not with your hands, idiots! With your fingers! You have to work with your fingers!" Hochman, the tailor, gave Zuska a gift of an old mannequin with one leg. Zuska would dress the mannequin in a jacket or coat, and we'd practice on it. If the mannequin jiggled when we touched its clothing, we failed the exam. That was my school. No one dared cheat our professor. Every time we managed to extract something from a stranger's pocket, Zuska got his cut, as we'd agreed. We were orphans without a home, and he was like a father to us. Even if one of the professor's students failed to bring in anything, he didn't go hungry. It's good to remember all this. I'm a big shot in Canada now. I'm in the hotel business, and Mr. Jack Grossman is a name to remember. I even have a say in the Jewish community. My lineage serves me well. Someone from Vilna. After my years in the wide world, I've become a gentleman. When I told people in Canada where I was from, a Jewish family with status cozied up to me. They matched me up with a girl in their family. No great beauty. She has a small defect. One of her shoulders is a little higher than the other, but she's very well educated, always with a book in her hand, even in bed. Her family set me up. They brought me into the business. Being around her, I became respectable and left Zuske the professor behind. Here I stand in 1989 on the corner of Gitketoibes Lane, and I think back to life in the 30s.
That was a bitter time. People escaped to Russia to save their lives. Well, they wanted to get out of harm's way, to work, to learn a trade. We know how that turned out.
I also wanted to escape to Russia. What with the police and the prisons, I was fed up with how I was earning my living. I was an orphan. So what kept me in Vilna? The city itself. I swam through Vilna like a fish in the Vilia River. I was at home from Sofianicus Street with the whorehouses crammed with shiksas and a few Jewish girls, all the way up to Novogorod Street. Novogorod was right next to the slaughterhouses where they killed the animals for the butcher shops. My pals lived on Novogorod. Those guys were always ready to pick someone's lock, to help a friend in need and bring him a tasty morsel in prison. One of those guys saved my life, though not intentionally. Thanks to him, I wasn't in Vilna when the Germans drove the Jews to Ponar to murder them.
What a story. Gorgeous Grishka, as he was called, was quite the guy. He used to put train passengers to sleep with special cigarettes. He was very smart, knew many languages. And Grishka was looking for a new partner, a business partner, to grab valises from the sleeping victims. He'd traveled with one of Motka, the little Kaiser's nephews, but they fought over the division of the loot. So he was looking around for someone else. Grishka wanted to work with Black Leka's little bastard, but Leka screamed and hollered that he was going to lead her kid astray. Even though she was a former streetwalker, her, Alinka, was not going to get involved in shady work. People in Vilna still remembered when Spokojny, the Moil, didn't want to perform Alinka's bris because no one knew the father. Leka insisted the father was Elijah the prophet because he'd left and never came back. Later, when Alinka studied at the Ramayla's yeshiva, his mother didn't dare come near the school. Gorgeous Grishka was keen to work with Alinka because Alinka was so honest. But Black Leka kept fussing over her kid, insisting he only do honest work until important people like Zelik the benefactor and wise Melech advised Grishka to look for someone else.
Grishka kept looking until eventually he got to me. If I put a new suit on you, people will think you're really somebody, so he said. He took me to Tzalka the Nose's ready-made clothing shop and bought me a double-breasted suit. I started to travel with him on the trains. I traveled with gorgeous Grishke until one of the passengers, a little aristocrat with whiskers, refused to fall asleep. He just dozed there with one eye open. When I made a grab for his valise, planning to jump off the train at the next stop, just past Krakow, he started hollering. I dropped the valise, opened the train door, and climbed onto the roof. I made it all the way to the Czech border, to Košice. It was an international train. You could write a novel about all the prisons and holes where I spent time before I got to Canada. Thanks to gorgeous Grishke, I avoided the slaughter. Later, someone told me they'd seen Grishke in Kloge, a camp in Estonia where they murdered the Vilna Jews and burned their bodies. I stand on the corner that was once Gitke Toibe's lane, and I wait. Maybe someone will run up to me and shout, "Itzik, Itzik, the hare, look at him!" But there isn't a single person left in Vilna who'd remember me. If a passerby bothers to throw me a glance, it's because of my camera. I promised to bring photographs back from Vilna. I've already been to Sofianicus Street in search of the last house, right next to the old fish market. That's where tall Tamara wanted to hang a sign, "Public School for Love."
Tamara got the idea from Syomka Kagan, the reporter from the Vilna Tog newspaper. He'd already tried organizing a professional streetwalkers union in Vilna with a separate Jewish section, but the whorehouse bosses on Sofyanica Street wouldn't allow it. They were afraid the girls would get it into their heads to demand overtime pay. So Syamka hatched another plan. Tamara and Black Leka would teach young Jewish men the art of love. That way, the teachers would earn a living and future grooms would learn what was what. It would also be a great honor for Jewish Vilna, the first school of its kind in the world. That's what Syamka wrote in the newspaper. Tall Tamara took the scheme seriously. She even ordered a sign from Karpel, the sign painter. Public school for love. But it was never hung. The whole business came to nothing.
I searched for that house, but didn't find even a brick. All of Sofyanica Street had been mowed down like grass in a meadow, no trace left. Only the Vilenke, the stream that splashed against the back walls of the brothels, still gurgles by, but sadder than before, on its way to the Vilia. On the street where Shimon the coachman once drove his horse and buggy so quickly the cobblestones trembled, mothers now sit on benches lined up on the dead earth, and their little children play in the sand.
Once mothers sat in the Bernardine garden with their children and threw scraps of bread to a pair of swans.
And on my street there was always a commotion like in an anthill.
Every building had at least 10 shops selling all kinds of goods. Tzalka the Nose and Kanovich with their ready-made clothing, Sarah Klock with her dressmaking notions, Talakinsky's salami, Frumkin's pharmacy, Bendel's barbershop, Proba's bakery. Is there anything you couldn't find on that street? You could leave there dressed, well-fed, shaved, and with a remedy for a cough.
Now mothers sit with their children and old Lithuanian women knit little jackets all on my street. Both sides of the street are now empty. You can't even get a glass of water to quench your thirst. And what's left on Yiddish Street, just opposite my street? Nothing. As though the street had never existed. Gone is Velfke Usian's restaurant where all the actors from the Yiddish theater used to come and eat. I knew them all. Moishe Karpinowitz with his little beard ran the theater on Ludwizarski Street. He used to let me in to watch the performances, but he'd warn me, "Itzik, go up to the balcony and keep your hands to yourself."
The entire city knew the theater. Everyone attended the performances, from young to old, from poor to rich, from the upper crust to the underworld. Sashka the Count had his regular seat for every performance. He behaved himself in the theater. He didn't try to enrich himself from anyone else's wallet. Karpinowitz, the theater manager, only had a problem with Sashka once. A Jew from America complained to him that someone had stolen his passport with $100 in it during the performance. He demanded compensation. Karpinowitz immediately went to see Sashka, ostensibly to ask for advice. Sashka the Count straightened his necktie and returned the passport with great dignity. Then he said, "Mr. Mesha, here's the passport. I hope that fool appreciates the city of Vilna and particularly this theater. And I hope you realize that the American is a swindler. He'd steal the whites from your eyes. He bamboozled you. There was only $20 in the passport, not 100. You should rake him over the coals for that lie."
Gone. Gone is Yosha with his kvass stand. Gone is Osherke, the herring's bar. They were all on Yiddish Street.
At Osherke's, people ate all different kinds of herrings starting early in the morning. And they also played billiards there.
Before my eyes, I see the entrance to Velfke's restaurant. One sunny day, Avramka the anarchist was sitting on the steps with something to say to everyone. He certainly never let a young lady, whether married or single, pass by without comment. I'd just left Osherka's bar, and I saw everything. I saw Davidke the cheat appear out of nowhere and stab Avramka in the heart with a knife. Avramka managed to stand up, grab Davidke by the arm, and cry out, "You too, Davidke!" Then he hit the ground, a dead man. My wife once took me to the theater. They were playing Julius Caesar by Shakespeare, a grim play with no singing or dancing. The theater on Ludwizarska Street was a much livelier place. With my limited English, I understood that when the senators attacked Caesar from all sides like real underworld types, he called out the very same words to his friend, Senator Brutus, who shoved a knife into him, just like the others. Did Avramka the anarchist know what Shakespeare had written, or did he have the soul of a Julius Caesar that prompted him in his final moments with those same words?
Avramka sold second-hand things in the passageway. He certainly had enemies. He ruled over the entire miserable trade without allowing any competition. But he gave Davidka a piece of the action from time to time, slipping him a little merchandise at bargain prices. In prison, Davidka went off the rails with remorse and stopped making sense. He tormented himself over Avramka's murder. When he went to pieces, they let him out of prison, but he was never seen on Yiddish Street again.
Glezer Street is gone too. Oh no, a few things remain. A wall here, a wall there, but it's no longer Glezer Street, where Zelik, the benefactor, had his tavern. That's where guys like Mishka Napoleon and Kalman the Squirrel got together. I wasn't in their league, so I'd sit at a little side table and order a quarter meter of kishke. Zelik, the benefactor's wife, was the queen of kishke. Her kishke melted in your mouth. It always came out brown and shiny like chestnuts fresh from the tree. She sold her merchandise by the meter, like Sarah Klock sold elastic for underwear.
Zelik's daughter, Taibka, was obsessed with playing the piano. How did someone like Taibka get interested in the piano? You shouldn't ask questions like that about people in Vilna. Everyone in Vilna wanted to be better and more beautiful. In Zelik's home, they knew plenty about smuggling tobacco from Lithuania, but nothing about the piano. So Taibka went to Sversky, the furrier's, to talk to his daughter, the piano teacher. She explained that she was dying to learn to play a little, but had no money for lessons. She offered to pay with kishke. When Sversky's daughter heard the word kishke, her mouth watered, and she immediately agreed. Good, bring us kishke. A winter and a summer came and went. Taibka worked on her piano playing. Tuthi Katza and Isaka, auction wholesalers, sold Zelik an old piano. When you walked through Glezer Street in the evening, you could hear Taibka playing. Now, Taibka wasn't the only one. Boys and girls sang in choirs, played mandolins, performed in plays. Every Friday, there was a social evening at the Real Gymnasium. People danced and read poetry. Outsiders often showed up, caused a commotion trying to force their way into the hall. The teachers stationed Jaime the dandy at the entrance to keep order. In exchange, he was allowed to dance with any girl he chose. Every girl at the Real Gymnasium was more beautiful than the next.
I knew them all from a distance. You could enter the gymnasium courtyard through Konski Street, just opposite Zuska the professor's bar, my trade school. I loved watching the guys and girls strolling across the courtyard during their long break. I would have liked to join them. Here I stand, after so many years, on the corner of Gitkit-Toibes Lane. I don't recognize my own city. It has run away from me, across the Vilnia, all the way to the forest, to Volokumpia. Sometimes on Shabbos we used to row to Volokumpia in a little boat we rented in Antokol from Jana, the boatman. And on my street, where day and night there were deals being made and a constant commotion, I am the last survivor of that street. To this day, memories of the street pierce my heart like a broken arrow that can't be removed without taking part of me with it. The street has become part of the silent old city. The area from Schnippishock all the way up to the Shishkin Hills that used to doze all week long is now the new city. Even the hotel where I'm staying is on the other side of the Vilnia, where the rafts used to come in and the boom men took the logs out of the water for the nearby sawmills. The shikse at the tourist bureau offered to show me the cities. Me, of all people. I could have walked the city from one end to the other with my eyes closed. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. At dawn, I left the hotel by myself and walked over the Vilnia Bridge to my Vilna, to Yiddish Street, to Glezer Street, to Yatkever and Rudnitsker Street, to what's now known as the Old City. I didn't recognize the place. There were new buildings that didn't match their surroundings, like someone wearing a tuxedo with canvas shoes. The lanes and passageways had disappeared. There are no corners to sneak into and hide. The city has grown big, puffed up like a rich upstart. There's no little nook to nestle into, no little corner to call your own. My wife warned me, "Don't go, you'll find nothing there but grief." But I had to see the city that raised me one more time. Her streets were my home, her people, my family. Even Mr. Chaim Gordon, the stern shamus from the great synagogue, always had a good word for me. "Itzik," he'd say, "one day you'll become respectable." Now I've become respectable. But who will listen to me brag? If only there had never been Germans on this earth, then Vilna would still be Vilna, and I wouldn't have become respectable with 2 hotels in Canada. They've set up a kindergarten on the spot in the synagogue courtyard where the shamus Mr. Chaim Gordon once lived.
He went to Ponar with all our fellow Jews. People will probably be offended. Look whose Vilna he's searching for. The Vilna of Zelik the benefactor and Tovka the angel.
Let them be offended. This is my Vilna. Let everyone from Vilna search for their own corner, their own special spot. None of us will find anything. Nothing remains. Here I stand, where Gitkit-Toibes Lane once was, and I cry. A little girl with a red bow in her blonde braids watches me as I let the tears stream down my face. She stretches out her hand to me. She's holding a bright red candy. I'd like to smile, but I can't. I murmur. It's Vilna without Vilna.
Vilna, Stadt von Geist und Mimes. Vilna, Yiddish Lach vertracht. wo es murmeln stille Tfilis, stilles Säudes von der Nacht. Oftmals seh ich dich in Cholem, heiß geliebte Vilna mein, und die alte Vilna ghetto in an appeldicken Schein. Vilna, Vilna, unser Heimstatt, unser Bänkschaft und Begehr. Ach, wie oft es ruft sein Nomen von mein Eugeräußert. Vilner Gesslach, Vilner Zeichen, Vilner Wälder Bar und Tor. Eppes Neuet, Eppes bringt sich noch die Zeiten von Amor. Ich seh dem Wälderle Sekretär in dein Schutten eingehüllt, wo geheimes Abendlehre unser Wissen durchgestillt. Vilna hat dem ersten vor dem von der Freiheitsfront gewebt und die liebe Kinder Idee mit einem zarten Geist belebt. Vilna, Vilna, unser Heimstatt, unser Bänkschaft und Begehr. Ach, wie oft es ruft sein Nomen von mein Eugeräußert. Vilner Gesslach, Vilner Zeichen, Vilner Wälder Berg und Tor. Eppes Neuet, Eppes bringt sich noch die Zeiten von Amor. Wälder Berg und Tor. Eppes Neuet, Eppes bringt sich noch die Zeiten von Amor.